Still with Australia. In past shows, I have warned of the dangers that Australia is in. A long time back, actually. Whereby they're caught between two fake superpowers, China and America. And that has increased since, and things have blown up again this week, as a Chinese official did a mock poster of an Australian military taunting them over human rights, after an inquiry determined that Australian forces have to answer to charges of their troops indiscriminately and wantonly killing young Afghan children. Now, earlier this month, the report found credible information that 25 Australian soldiers were involved in the murders of 39 Afghan civilians and prisoners between 2009 and 2013. And also the image appears to be a reference to a previously reported allegations that elite Australian soldiers used knives to murder two 14-year-old Afghan boys. Now, they are not the only countries, military or troops to commit atrocities in war-torn countries. And it is an epidemic due to the mind control and drugged up nature that soul dyers undergo. All of them. And another thing that needs addressing globally. Now, the bilateral relations between the two countries have rapidly deteriorated this year after Australia led calls for an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic and ongoing discussions about Beijing's alleged interference in Australian affairs. And in recent months, China has imposed a series of economic blows, including trade stoppages and tariffs on about a dozen Australian imports, including wine, barley and beef. And then China announced it will impose taxes on Australian wine of up to 212% starting on Saturday. And its Commerce Ministry said these were temporary anti-dumping measures to stop subsidised imports of Australian wine, and the duties will range from 107% up to 212%, which has now intensified trade tensions between the two countries, which is exactly what I warned about, was it 3 years ago? You know, I covered it. They kind of give it away if you go and watch the series Pine Gap, of how Australia are caught between China and America for the military and safety backup of the country. They're forced to go with the Langley agents in Pine Gap. That links back to Washington. But then the treasonous Australian politicians have done all their food and produce trade deals with China. So if you don't go with China, they cut off your food. If you don't go with America, you've got no protection. And this is where the self-sustaining comes in again, self-sufficiency. Now, in recent months, Beijing has targeted more of Australians' imports, including coal, sugar, barley and lobsters. And Australia has described China's actions as economic coercion. Of course it is. That's what we warned of a few years back. And one wonders how or why Australian officials couldn't see the obvious. Two things would stop all of this. 1, no foreign troops in any country. And 2, each country becomes sovereign and self-sufficient. You could also add a non-partisan committee made up of the people, not politicians, they're jackasses, to decide other trade deals between countries who, despite attempts to be self-sufficient, can't for whatever reason. And the trustee, instead of funding the Black Sun, Israel and vaccine manufacturers, can also play an important role in this as well, as each country's funds can be paid to each country that starts up a self-sufficiency program. And the self-sufficiency allows countries to not be raped by the so-called clown-funded large countries, and can build and develop their own countries in a better way, with more industry being in-house, instead of being held hostage by other countries whose sole operation is to harvest everyone else. And I'm calling on the trustee to implement that program. It's one way of getting the funds out. Self-sufficiency. But please put in proper conditions of that funding.